Thank you. Look, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning. But before we get into the content, I have a little secret to confess. So whisper it quietly, don't tell anyone. I don't actually know a lot about horse racing. And when I say that, I'm being really generous to myself. I know very little indeed, and I was that case study that David has talked about. When I went to my first event, I was handed this card, and it had names, and it had letters, and it had numbers, and I didn't know what was going on, what was happening, and all of a sudden there was a race, and there was some noise, and then that finished, and I didn't really know who had won, and what was I meant to cheer or not, and I got a bit lost, I'll be honest. So at this point, you would be forgiven for being sat there going, well, why the hell is he here? What's this? This is a racing industry conference. We are experts in our field. We have some challenges and some things that we want to get on with. And then there's this bloke here stood at the front going, I've got no idea what I'm here for. But what I might be able to just talk about in my sport, which may or may not have some resonance or relevance to yours, is I can talk with a lot of experience about the challenges around modernizing a sport, about a sport that had a preconception of a design for a certain demographic that were ABC1, that were white, that were male, and the need to drag that sport into the future without losing the core of what it's about. And it may well be that there's some resonance in the managing of the stakeholders, managing of the sport, and the differing views and things that we had to go through to get to where we are today. And I believe that the last few years in creating the 100, whether you like cricket, know cricket or not, that story may have some lessons that may be of interest to people in this room. And who knows, there may be one or two things, and that's all I ask for, one or two things for one or two people that you can take away and learn and learn from our mistakes, because I'll be very open in what I say over the next kind of 10 minutes or so. We made a lot of mistakes through that, as you do with any process. We tried something, we gave it a go, a lot of it has worked, and I'll talk to that. Some of it hasn't. And so it'll be some of those things that hopefully we'll be able to talk about. If not, I've got some videos that our marketing team have put up, which are quite nice and shiny and good to watch, and hopefully that will wake us up. And if all else fails, if you do have to fall asleep for the next 20 minutes, go for it. Just try not to snore and disturb people next to you. So, look, I'll talk a little bit about my sport, about cricket and where that is. I'm aware that some people in this room may well be huge cricket fans and know everything about it, may know more than me. Others, perhaps slightly less so. So for the first few minutes, I'll just bring us up, hopefully up to speed, and just give everyone a little bit of context of the sport of cricket for those that aren't aware. And I'll start with a 30-second video just to bring that to life.
We've been waiting for the start of the 100th. Bang! It's out of the oval!
Six.
Leg side, man out there. Oh, brilliant stop. Brilliant stop. Bold. He goes big. It's 6. It's a magnificent 100 for Harry Brook. Swung into the leg side. Oh, brilliant bit of fielding out in the deep. That is a quite magnificent piece of fielding.
It's the first woman to hit a ton in the 100.
Oh, superb! What a catch! 1, 2, 3. It's taken. Oh, he's held it!
Goes for 6. The Southern Brave have beaten their nemesis.
Overton wins it for the originals. There will be a new name on the trophies this year.
What a moment for the Southern Brave 2023. The Southern Brave women have finally crossed that line.
Outstanding from the Oval Invincibles. They are the 100 men's champions 2023.
So, a bit of an introduction of what the 100 is and what the 100's about. Some of you may be sat there going, that was all a bit quick and all a bit noisy and lots of loud crash bang wallop. That is, to an extent, all part of it. So in terms of where cricket is today, just so people again have the context, globally, there are lots of things going for it. We are the second biggest sport in the world today. We have a number of fans that follow the women's sport, and in terms of team sports, we're often considered out there in terms of leading some of that charge. A lot of that is driven by the Indian subcontinent, but there are countries and places growing around the world. And actually, what might not be known is that actually if you can compare it to other sports, the Indian IPL, which is the Premier League that's based in India, as the name would suggest, is driving huge change and huge growth. And those circles on the right-hand side start to showcase. We think the Premier League is huge. It's massive in this country in terms of clout and finance and growth. And just look at the size of an average viewership of a Premier League football match compared to the average IPL game, which is comparison in some respects to the Football World Cup. Year in, year out. It's played every year in March and April. If you come closer to home, in this country we have 13 million people that profess to be fans of the sport, which is great. A high proportion of those would consider themselves passionate about the sport, which is what every sport we're all driving for, is that it's great to have a big number, but how many of those are really passionate about the sport? We have a number of players and people that buy those tickets. These are the things that we consider and are bothered about. So there's a lot going for it. There was a lot going for it back in 2018 when we were thinking about this. So what was the point? What are the challenges that we were trying to battle with? And on the flip side, it by all means wasn't all good. The average age of someone that bought a ticket to attend cricket was 58 years old. They were overwhelmingly, nearly 85% were men. The average price of a test match ticket, if you went to Lord's, our big flagship, is £160 for the day. That attracted a certain demographic. We needed to pull ourselves out of that and diversify that audience. We needed to make sure that in a world where that next generation, the generation that Jeremy was talking about, that in the future will have spending power, in the future will be the future of the sport, have a place where they felt that they belonged, which they didn't do at the moment, because they have an ever-increasing number of choices, an ever-increasing roster of things that they can do, which could be, well, cricket's not for me, then I'll go football or rugby or racing. Or I'll stay at home and I'll have Netflix, or I'll do esports and gaming, and the list just continues to grow. And so there was a real need from a sporting perspective, from a commercial perspective, from a people perspective, that we had to buck that image of that chap. I don't know who he is, so apologies if someone does. But that is some of those things that we had to break. And the image of people like him dressed in their kind of baking and egg blazers, asleep at the pavilion at Lord's and kind of all that sort of stuff, and a 5-day match that goes on and it's really boring and then you get a draw and all that kind of stuff, is something we had to, if we wanted to avoid being a niche sport 5-10 years down the line. So that was what we were trying to break. And so what we set out to do was to broaden our appeal. That it was as simple as that. How do we take someone like myself who's been brought into the sport, and the similarities here are there in terms of what I've just heard, but if you're a cricket fan, if you're born into the sport, so your dad, or to a less extent, they're growing, your mum was involved in the sport, or there's a small minority of those that are fortunate enough that their school teacher was a massive cricket fan. That's it. That's how you get into the sport at the moment. We had to break that cycle. We had to grow. So for someone like myself who would go to a cricket match with some friends, have a few beers, have a wonderful evening, what is the product where I go, actually, I'll take my wife and I'll take my kids and we can bring those. So we had to broaden that. It wasn't enough to just to take people that loved that thing over here and move them over here. We had to make the overarching pie bigger. As part of that, we had to seek that more children, you fall in love with a sport between the ages of 5 and 12. It is really hard to do that after that. That is your age group. That is your category. If you haven't experienced the sport and had a good experience before those ages, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult to draw someone in. So how can we get the family with those age groups of kids to pick up, in our case, pick up a bat and a ball, have that great first experience? We could see now, and we were, in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing that back in 2017, there was this thing called women's sport, and that was growing, and that looked like a good thing. We should do that. So how can we make something that was really a shining light for those sports, for women's sport, and drive women's sport? For a sport, cricket, there's no reason why it can't be gender equal. And then last but not least, we had to diversify our revenues. We had to grow that money. We don't do any of this. No one here does any of it for pure money, but it is the rocket fuel that allows you to invest in all the other stuff that you wanted to do. So we set about to broaden that appeal. And there are 3 things that you need, and you need all 3 to grow any sport. You need quality, you need jeopardy, and you need connection. So you need quality. The sport, bluntly, has to be impressive. It's why the Olympics are so huge. I don't know if you're the same as me, but the Olympics, they'll be coming next summer. I will watch all of it. I will have no idea what's going on, but I'll watch it on my screen and go, that's impressive. Whatever they're doing, whatever he or she is doing, that is impressive athleticism. And people are sucked into that. They enjoy watching that. That's why, everyone's a rugby expert now, because it's impressive to watch, even if you don't watch it for the rest of the year. So you need a quality in that sport. So we needed something that was best versus best in our sport. And you saw in that clip there of the athletes diving around, hitting sixes. That's our impressive quality. You need jeopardy. It can't be a foregone conclusion of who's going to win, who's going to lose, what's going to happen. You need people on the edge of their seats. At the end of the day, we're an entertainment industry. And people like not knowing what the outcome is until the outcome has happened. The football Premier League and the pyramid have done a brilliant job at that. There's the jeopardy of whether in the men's game Arsenal will topple Man City, but then there's the same jeopardy of who's going to come in the Champions League places, in the Europa League places, who's going to get relegated. There's jeopardy all the way down. And so we needed to create something where people they knew that there was results that they could talk about and discuss and have a conversation about. But last but not least, you needed connection. And these audiences need to connect with these teams. And what was interesting was actually more and more now, it's not so much connecting with the team, but connecting with the superstar and with the athlete. So an obvious example of you could say potentially yesteryear, is the Messi and Ronaldo. Ronaldo has more followers than any of the kind of on Instagram and all these sorts of things, than all the rest combined. The highest followed league in the world on social media is now the Saudi Pro League. Before that, it was the Premier League. Before that, it was the Spanish League. Before that, it was La Liga. There's a trend here. People will follow the superstar. They will follow Ronaldo. They're now following Messi in America. We had some superstars, men and women, that we were doing nothing with. And we needed to create that connection. People wanted that connection to their teams. And when you talk about some of the challenges, and I'll talk about some of the challenges we had, one of the difficult truths that we had to face into is that people don't, on the whole, that generation, did not have a connection, sorry David, to Gloucestershire, to our county teams. It didn't resonate. People weren't Gloucestershire people, they were Bristolians. People weren't Middlesex people, that county doesn't, it's a medieval boundary that was drawn ages ago. I live in London, I'm a Londoner, and so on and so forth. And so that connection was something that was missing. And we had to create those three things, that quality, connection, and jeopardy into our sport. And so for that, in terms of that connection and how you build that connection, we were very clear, as talking about before, what we were going for after was families, the whole family, but specifically within that, those that had kids between that 5 to 12. Yeah, if you've got younger kids, great. If you've got older kids, great. All of that's obviously great. It's not at the expense of everything else, but those were the audiences that we wanted to get to. So how could we create something, again, that I'm sure there are many Test cricket fans in this country, in this room, that those that loved Test cricket had that product, have it there. Those that really enjoyed and can understand that card that I got when I was at Ascot, the product is there. It's great, and that can continue. You can everything dear about that. But at the same time, what was missing for those families? And we sat down and we spoke to people, and we learned, and we did, a lot has been mentioned about data and insight so far. And we took the hard yards of not speaking to those that we knew and those that loved cricket. That's there and that happens. But those that don't like cricket, and those that weren't buying the tickets, those that were choosing, they're saying they're sports fans, but choosing not to come to cricket. And I remember we did a focus group, and the very first focus group, we had all these kind of early 20-year-olds, teenagers sat in a room. We'd offer them some free food, so they kind of turned up. And we hadn't said what the topic was about. And the wake-up call was, we said, right, we're going to talk about cricket, and we got 2 massive eye rolls. One lad literally slammed his head on the table like that, and one walked out. And if that wasn't a wake-up call of what their perception was of the sport, there was nothing else that could be. But we faced into that hard truth of actually, well, what don't you like about the sport? What is not working for you? And there were 3 things that came out on top. 3 things that we had to address. The first, and this is cricket specific, though again, there may be things that resonate. The first is time. Bloody hell, this sport takes so long. Right? You play for 5 days, even a one-day matches, I've got to be there from 10:30 till 8 o'clock. T20, our short format, is 4.5 hours long. So people just don't have that attention span anymore. You then talk to parents, and I'm a parent now of an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. A T20 match at Bristol would finish at 10:30. It's too late. As a good parent, I don't want to take my kids to that. It's just too long. So the first thing we could talk about was, okay, can we finish at 9? That's about right. It's a treat for my kids. It's a bit later than they otherwise would, but it's doable. Can we shorten that? Can we squeeze that into that attention span? The second challenge that we had was that report card. And it's the same thing in cricket. You walk into a ground, you walk into a stadium, and there's a big screen, and there are numbers everywhere. Compare it to football, right? 1-0. I know who's winning. I know what's going on. And that team's wearing red, and that team's wearing blue. I got it, right? I know what's happening. Cricket didn't have that. But actually, cricket didn't have that. Again, our core audience loved the fact that cricket didn't have that, because you're into run rates and tactics and kind of Duckworth-Lewis methods and all this kind of stuff. But for this audience, that was putting them off. I didn't know what was happening. So how can we simplify the sport, or perceive that at the top layer there is that simplification there without losing the integrity of the sport, present it in a simple, accessible way? And then last but not least, there was a perception that this sport is not for me. It's for white middle-class boys. And especially as we were looking to grow the female audience, we had to break that perception and therefore reality that was who this sport was for. And you would have seen, for a team sport, that image at the end of that video where the Southern Brave women lift the trophy at exactly the same time as the Oval Invincible men. We had to, and then there's all this other stuff behind it in terms of how we treat, and racing here is further ahead than us in many respects in that. But we had to break the way we presented this product, the way we presented the sport. We had to break a preconception that it's not for me, it's old fuddy-duddies. And so those are the things that we were looking proactively to break in what we were doing. And in terms of that, how we look to do it, what I'll show is one more video before I talk about some of the things that didn't work. But I think it just highlights how we presented it. So this is the first video that we presented to announce that there's this new thing, this new tournament that we were looking to launch for cricket.
could feel it all. I could feel it all. You know I said it's true. I could feel the love. Can you feel it too? I could feel it all. I could feel it all. Yeah. You know I said it's true. I could feel the love. Can you feel it too? I could feel it all. I could feel it all. You know I said it's true. I could feel the love. Can you feel it too? I could feel it all. I could feel it all.
Bueller. 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 Bueller.
Gotta tell you, gotta tell you, gotta tell you, gotta tell you. You know I said it's true. You know I said You know I said it's true. I can feel the love. Can you feel it too? I can feel it all. I can feel it all. You know I said it's true. I can feel the love. Can you feel it too? I can feel it all. I can feel it all. You know I said it's true. You know I said
So you would have noticed that that was a video to introduce a new cricket tournament that was 90 seconds long, of which the last 5 seconds had the first clip of anything to do with cricket. Because our biggest insight was, for these younger generations, what often happens, what we do a lot about sport, in this room we all love our sport. And the younger generation that aren't involved kind of go, well, I don't like cricket, it's not really for me. Yeah, but cricket, it's really good. Yeah, but I don't quite, no, but cricket, if you really liked it, and we just end up shouting louder and louder about the things that don't work. And the biggest thing was understanding for this generation what is important to them, what is culturally relevant for them. Music, dance, food, and insert cricket into that. Rather than trying to pull them to you, trying to get cricket and move to them. And that was one of our biggest insights through this, and something that we are trying to hold true to this day. But there was all sorts of stuff that I won't go into, that governance is there. David has talked a lot about governance and all the rest of it that we had to do to get this through the line. I've talked a lot about the insights in the audience, but there is a lot in the 3 years that we had to do. But linked to that, just to finish on some of the lessons that we have learned, and I talked about at the start, we haven't got this all right. There are still a lot of things that we need to continue to develop and continue to work on. In cricket, there are 41 voting members that we had to get this through. And there's an aspect where it was bulldozed through. And there is an aspect where there are stakeholders that still aren't happy with the change that we've made, but we've driven it through and it's got success. So that's softening, but there is now a work that we have to bring some of the aspects of the sport together. And that aspect of constantly managing different stakeholders. We have £60 million businesses down to negative £100,000. There's all sorts of different ranges within those. They're all equal vote members. So to be able to combine those tensions and be able to create a tournament that works for everyone is really hard. And we have not succeeded at this point yet. And we need to continue to do that. But our one way through is twofold. We created partners. We had real good partners in Sky and the BBC. And we have been obsessively and unapologetically audience-led. Forget us in the middle, this messy middle of the sport and what we work. What does the fan want? What does the punter want? What does that young kid and that family, what do they need and want? And let's start there and work backwards. And then we can work backwards of how we figure it out amongst ourselves and who gets distributions and funding and all this kind of stuff. We, in the sport, have added other challenges. We talk a lot in the sport about the schedule and the players, and those are our athletes and our flagships, and we need to work with them, but we've added to their schedule and their chaos. And the other thing to point out that's there is we're 3 years in, still a little baby, but we're having to go again. The world has shifted all over again, and the change is having to go again, and we have to continue to evolve and change the 100. It wasn't right, we've done it once, we've solved it, we've got a family audience, tick, let's move on. So there's lots in there that that has worked brilliantly. This year, we sold 96% of all our tickets, of which 42% of those were families with kids under the age of 10. It's been brilliant, but there's still lots of stuff that are lessons that we have to work with. Thank you very much. Hope some of you found that enjoyable. Hope some of that stuff was resonating with your industry. As I said, I don't know a huge amount about it. I believe I'm handing back to Rishi, and then you guys can grill me.
Yes, if you have a seat.